Hi everyone, my name is Jen. I'm an author and a book reviewer. At the beginning of August, I uploaded a very long reading vlog where I read the majority of this year's Booker Prize long list. I'll link that video up here and down below. I will be recapping some things in this video, but if you want to hear my in-depth thoughts on the books that I read in that video, you can head over there. I read 9 out of the 13 books. The 4 that I didn't get to at the time were Trust by Hernan Diaz. The premise didn't grab me at first, but then loads of people said it was their favourite, so I ended up picking it up, but it's not on the shortlist, so we won't be talking about it in this video. I didn't pick up Booth by Karen Joy Fowler because I hadn't enjoyed her previous book, We Are All Completely Beside Ourselves, so I just didn't think that it was going to be my cup of tea. I chose not to pick up O. William by Elizabeth Strout because, again, I had read her before and hadn't been a huge fan, but admittedly that had been a very long time ago and our tastes change. And I had wanted to read The Trees by Percival Everett, but it was out of print in the UK at the time and I couldn't get my hands on it. O. William and The Trees has now been shortlisted, so I will be reading those in this video, and I will be talking about the shortlist as a whole as well. And as I do with all reading vlogs, I'll take you on some walks, we'll do some cooking, we'll hang out over the course of the next week or so. Now, reading any long list is normally a mixed bag because you're reading lots of different judges' favourite books. I have judged prizes myself before and I know how heated discussions can get. So it's not surprising that there are going to be some books that you love and some books that you don't when you approach a list of 13 books like that. But when the shortlist was announced a few weeks ago, I have to say that my gut reaction was one of confusion. I was perplexed. My favourites did not make the shortlist, and I think that was the case for a lot of people because when I posted my very brief reaction on Instagram, I received about 100 messages from people saying, yeah, hard agree. And I didn't get one message from anyone who said, no, these are my 6 favourite books. So it's an interesting one this year, and I would love to know your thoughts in the comments section down below. So let me talk about briefly the 4 books from this year's 6 shortlisted books that I've already read, and then we can crack on with reading the 2 that I haven't yet got to. Out of the 4 shortlisted books, there were 2 that I didn't really enjoy and there were 2 that I liked quite a bit but weren't my favourites from the whole long list. If you want to know my in-depth thoughts, you can head over to the long list video, but let me very briefly recap. The 2 books that I didn't enjoy were Glory by Novaya Bulawayo. This is inspired by Mugabe. It is also inspired by George Orwell. We have an extended metaphor here relating to Animal Farm where all of the characters are animals, but the personification in this book didn't really make sense to me. You could take that out and the book would be the same. It didn't particularly add anything. None of the characters related to or were characterized by the animals that they were. It just seemed like this very strange add-on to force it to relate to Animal Farm, and that disappointed me quite a lot because I thought there was so much you could do with that, you know? So it ended up being a DNF for me. I didn't find it sustainable across so many pages. Yeah, that one was something that made me sad. And then the other one that I didn't really like was Treacle Walker by Alan Garner. This would have been a DNF if it wasn't, you know, a very, very short book. This is something that I find quite difficult about prizes. I find it odd when sequels which rely on prior knowledge of the author's work are longlisted or shortlisted for prizes. And often that can be because a prize wants to honour a particular author and their career and what they have brought to the world of literature. And that's great, but that's not what this particular prize is about. And that was one of the main criticisms of Margaret Atwood's The Testament, winning jointly, controversially, with Bernardine Evaristo a few years ago, because The Testaments is nowhere near as good as The Handmaid's Tale, and it relies on so much prior knowledge of The Handmaid's Tale. It seemed to be honouring Margaret Atwood's career, all of that stuff. This has been talked about so much in literary spheres. I'm not going to talk about it a lot, but I feel like a similar thing is going on here with regard to Alan Garner. He's in his 80s, he is a very well-respected author, but this is not his best work, and it also relies on prior knowledge of his work to get the most out of it because there are lots of references to his previous books. This isn't a sequel, but I think for it to be enjoyed to its fullest, or some would argue to be enjoyed at all, you have to have a wealth of knowledge of his previous created universes. And that is absolutely fine when it comes to this book existing and people loving it, but I don't really think it means that it's a good fit for a prize like this, which should be rewarding one specific book. So this is probably an argument that could go round and round and round, and probably will do. And you know that I love short experimental books. I adore Grief is a Thing with Feathers, which is inspired by Ted Hughes, but you don't have to have knowledge of Crow to love that book. You can get a lot of enjoyment out of it without that knowledge. And I know many, many people who have done. This, I feel like, is very different. It's also one of these books where, and I may regret saying this online, but I feel as though some people pretend to like it more than they do because they think that if they say they don't, then it makes them look less intelligent. Then the books that I did like, we have The 7 Moons of Marley Almeida by Shehan Karunatilaka. This is a book that is loosely inspired by A Christmas Carol, the character of Marley, because it is about a photographer who is a ghost and he is moving through the afterlife, trying to work out how he died and also talking to people who he met briefly in his life as a war photographer, and trying to think about how he documented his life and the deaths of other people and what merit that had, what his actions did and the consequences of those actions. I thought there was much to admire about this book. I thought it was perhaps a little bit too long. I liked it. I didn't love it, I liked it. And the same with Small Things Like These by Claire Keegan. I've read the majority of her books and really enjoyed them. I think that her writing is rich, evocative. Her dialogue is always fantastic, and the way she writes about nature too is wonderful. This is a very short novel about a man called Bill Furlong who is getting ready for Christmas and he's delivering coal to his neighbours. It's set in the time of the Magdalen laundries, and if you had no knowledge of those, I think that your enjoyment of this would be heightened because it would have that element of surprise. But I knew quite a lot about those and had read several novels about them, so I didn't get that sucker punch that I think you would get if you didn't know what was coming. And I won't ruin it for you in case you don't know what I'm talking about. I thought that it was a very well crafted short book, but it didn't stick with me. So those are the 4 books that I have read. Let me reach behind me. The 2 books that I have yet to read. We have Oh William by Elizabeth Strout. This is also a sequel. We can talk about that when it comes to reviewing it. And then also we have The Trees by Percival Everett. I'm not going to talk about the plot of both of these books because I'm going to be talking about that as I read and discuss with you. So that is where we're at. I am going to leave you for, well, for you it'll be a couple of minutes, but for me it's probably going to be a couple of days while I get on with reading. But right now I'm going to go for a walk in Battersea Park with Mr. M, hoping that it's going to be quite autumnal and nice. So I will insert some footage of that here and I will come back to you when I've done some reading. just checking in briefly to say that I've started reading O. William by Elizabeth Strout. Now, the book of hers that I read previously, it was probably pre-Booktube, I think, was Olive Kitteridge, and I can't remember what it was about that book, but at that specific time, it just didn't appeal to me and I couldn't get into it. But that's not the case with this book, which is very exciting. I'm finding this novel extremely readable. Now, that's a word, when I say it, kind of means nothing, or it could mean a good thing or a bad thing. It's a bit of a nothing word. Let me be more helpful. I'm finding it extremely easy to read because it's written in a very conversational tone. It makes you want to keep on reading. There's not a whole lot of punctuation, very long sentences. It's narrated by Lucy Barton, the main character, and it feels as though, how I would describe this is that it's like reading a play. It's like you're watching a play, really. It's not like you're reading one because there are no stage directions, but it's like you're watching a play and you're seeing a scene play out, and then everyone will freeze and there'll be a spotlight on Lucy and she'll turn to you in the audience and she'll tell you what she thinks about what is going on. And there's something very charming about that. I like it. Now, as I mentioned at the beginning of this video, this is a sequel, and I have feelings about books that are sequels being put in for prizes. Whenever I have judged a prize in the past, we've always been told, it's been in our instructions, that we have to judge a book on its own. We can't go out and shouldn't go out and read any books that have come before it if it's part of a series. And if we happen to have read the books that have come before them outside of prize reading, we have to try to separate them from the book and think about if this book stands on its own 2 feet. This is the 3rd book in the Lucy Barton series, and there's another one that's just come out actually, because this came out at the beginning of the submission period last year, and the 4th one just came out. And I didn't want to read the first 2 because I wanted to just see what this one on its own was like in the context of this prize. Now, what is interesting about this is that the main character, Lucy, is an author, and this is a book that she's saying she has written, and the previous 2 books in this series are books that she, the character, has also written. So the reason that I think, and we'll see if I change my mind as this progresses, the reason I feel like this works as a standalone is because she references the other books, but they're part of the novel. It's quite meta, and because those novels exist as outputs of her character in this fictional world, I don't mind that I haven't read them, because in a way it feels as though I shouldn't have read them, because it's almost like they don't exist. They only exist inside here. I hope that that makes sense. It makes sense in my head. So for that reason, I don't mind. And I think that this book works. I should say what this is about. So Lucy has just lost her husband, and she's talking to her previous husband, William, with whom she has 2 children. And they had a rocky relationship when they were together. I'm assuming that's what the previous books are about. And sometimes when they meet up, it's like the old times in a good way, and sometimes when they meet up, it's like the old times in a bad way. And they really know how to hurt each other, accidentally or on purpose. It's an interesting dynamic. I'm enjoying reading about it. And something that crops up a couple of times is that a character will buy a present for another character, and the other character doesn't appreciate it because really what they've done is bought a present that they would have liked to have received themselves, and they've missed the mark. There's a miscommunication between what people want. All of these characters feel as though they're not receiving the love and attention that they deserve, and they're trying to grant that to themselves and give themselves presents in the form of gifting things to other people. And I think that that is really painful to read about, and also quite apt, because we do that as people. We do give things to people that we would like to receive ourselves. So I'm enjoying that subtlety, and I will report back once I finish reading it. I imagine it won't take me long to finish this at all. That was not the most appetizing meal I've ever shared on here, but I really craved it. Mushrooms in butter and garlic on rocket on toast. It's good. Very good lunch. All right, So I finished reading Oh William, and I really enjoyed this book. I don't have a huge amount to add to the last clip. It continued to be something that I could race through. I actually read this in 2 sittings, and I haven't done that with a book in a really long time. I liked the narrative voice. I liked how it played around with fictions that we tell ourselves about our lives and the people in our lives, and then how that links in with narrative storytelling in books with the main character being an author. I don't want to talk about that too much because then I think we're stepping into spoiler territory with an aspect of this book, but there is someone who Lucy Barton meets during the course of this novel who knows a lot about her because she's read her previous work, and Lucy feels as though this person has an advantage over her because she's seen into her life and she's caught off guard by that. And I think that's fun to think about in the context of us as readers knowing things about her, and also me being a reader who doesn't have all the context that this other character has because I haven't read the previous books that this character has written. I don't know, you can go around in circles with that one, but I thought that was kind of fun. Do I think this is a book that I would typically say would win the Booker Prize? Not really. I enjoyed it. I didn't particularly think it was brilliant, and the tagline of the Booker Prize is finest fiction, or at least it used to be. I assume it's still that. It's supposed to be exemplary works of fiction, and I wouldn't say that that's what this is. I wasn't particularly bowled over or surprised by it. I didn't find myself thinking, wow, that's new and exciting, you know, but I did really like it. I did find it rather comforting, and I would like to read more Elizabeth Strout books in the future. So that's how I feel about that one. I am going to go, not right now, but I'm going to go for a walk tomorrow with Sana along Regent's Canal, and I always love doing that. As you know, it is one of my happy places. So we're going to walk along Regent's Canal, and Books in My Bag very kindly sent me a gift voucher the other week because it was National Bookshop Day, and if you come off Regent's Canal at Regent's Park, you can reach Marylebone High Street, which is where Daunt Books is. And if it's quiet, I think I will put my mask on and go inside and maybe spend that voucher. I'm not sure what I'm going to purchase. I would like to go and kind of pick up something that I maybe not discover for the first time in the bookshop, but see that day and think, yes, I would like to purchase you, because that's what bookshops, in my mind, are for. I use them in quite a different way in person as opposed to when I buy books from bookshops online. I like to go in and browse, see what's on the table, the staff recommendations and all of that stuff. So I will film some B-roll footage of that walk, and I will come back to you afterwards and I'll show you what book, if any, I decide to buy. It was such a beautiful day yesterday and we had a lovely walk, and we did end up going to Daunt Books just very quickly. It was quiet downstairs. I was the only person in the downstairs section, which felt rather magical, and I decided to purchase this. Now, I was reminded of its existence because it had a whole window display. Daunt Books also publish books. Not that many, they don't have a huge list, but in the window they had A Helping Hand by Celia Dale, I think that's right, I'll put the cover here, which is a book that is one of my most anticipated releases for this autumn. It's actually from the 60s, but it's been reissued with a new introduction by Jen Ashworth, and it's for fans of Shirley Jackson, Roald Dahl and Muriel Spark. Super keen about it. I talked about it in my most anticipated releases video, which I'll link down below. So one window was dedicated to loads of copies of that, and then the other was dedicated to copies of this. So this is The Pachinko Parlour by Elijah Shua Dussapin, and it's translated from the French by Anissa Abbas Higgins. I read her previous book, Winter in Sokjo. I will insert the cover here. At the beginning of this year, because I was filming a vlog where I was reading other booktubers' favourite books of the year. And I didn't love it, but it was a quiet book. And I just got a sense that maybe I would like to try her again and see if I liked another of her books more. And the premise of this one just really appealed to me. So when I was downstairs, they split everything up into countries. So it's not just books that are translated from a certain language, but it's books that are about that country. And this was also in the Japan section. The author grew up in France, I think Switzerland as well, and also Korea. So the first novel was set in Korea, but this one is set in Japan. So it says, it is a summer in Tokyo. Claire finds herself dividing her time between tutoring 10-year-old Miko in an apartment in an abandoned hotel and lying on the floor at her grandparents' home daydreaming of playing Tetris and she's daydreaming and playing Tetris and listening to sounds from the street above. The heat rises, the day slips by. When her grandparents first arrived in Tokyo, fleeing the civil war in Korea, they opened Shiny, a pachinko parlour. Shiny is still open, drawing people in with its bright flashing lights and promises of good fortune. And as Miko and Claire gradually bond, a tender relationship growing, Miko's determination to visit the pachinko parlour builds, and with it, Claire's own desire to visit Korea with her grandparents. So I thought I would give this one a go. I'm going into it, I guess, with lower expectations than last time, because last time it was the first book by her that I'd read and I was reading it because it was someone's favourite book of the year. Whereas this time I think I'm just hoping that I'll be pleasantly surprised. We'll see how I get on with it. Anyway, so I purchased that, and I have since started reading The Trees by Percival Everett, and I'm already nearly halfway through, a third to half the way through. I'm really enjoying this one. This is set in Mississippi, and we meet two white families, and in each family, a male member is brutally murdered. And when the police show up, not only is the man there, but there's also a stranger who they don't know, and he is also dead. So there's the dead white man and there's a stranger who's a dead black man. But the same dead black man is at both crime scenes, and they take both bodies away, but by the time they get back to the police station, only the white man's body is there and the black man has gone. And then he turns up at the next crime scene. So they're calling him the Black Ghost. They don't really know what's going on. Two black cops are called from the MBI, the Mississippi Bureau of Investigation, to come and find out what is happening. But the white cops in Mississippi are really annoyed that these cops have come down to kind of oversee everything that's going on. Now, this is inspired by the murder of Emmett Till, who was lynched in the 1950s after a white woman in a store accused him falsely of harassing her, and members of her family then killed him. So the men who have been murdered in this book are the descendants of the men who killed Emmett Till. I am loving the tone of this book. One thing that I don't like, which is not the fault of the authors as far as I can tell, is the formatting is incorrect in my edition. So sometimes authors will choose not to start a new line if someone else starts speaking. Same with speech marks. Not all authors use them, and that's a stylistic choice. But in this book, occasionally new lines will start if someone is speaking, and sometimes they don't. So sometimes we'll have two people speaking on the same line, but because of the way it's been formatted, it sounds like it's the same person speaking, and I'm finding that really clumsy to read. It seems to be almost a printing error. That's frustrating because you want to be able to not have those things so you can just get right to the heart of the book. That's the only thing that's frustrating me right now. And that should have been caught before it went to print. Something that I'm finding quite intriguing is that the police officers, Jim and Ed, when they get to the town of Mississippi where they're investigating these murders, they see a sign for a local diner and it says, you should go there and get the catfish, it's really good. And then when they go there, they realize that there are lots of people in this town who are called something different to what other people call them. And I wonder if catfish is important in where the story is going, or if that's something that doesn't play out at all, but that's just an inkling that I'm getting right now, that people seem to have multiple identities, and that's kind of intriguing. This novel is obviously dealing with really heavy stuff, but it also has a humorous touch to it as well, which is quite disorientating, but in a way that the author is clearly orchestrating really well, trying to make you feel unsettled and unbalanced, and I think that that is really effective. So I'm enjoying it very much, and I will check back in with you probably when I finished, to be honest, because I can see myself racing through the rest. Final clip, because I finished reading The Trees by Percival Everett. I really loved the first third to half of this book. So when I last left you, I was so enjoying it. It is satire meets horror. Satirical stuff is so subjective. Humor as a whole is very subjective, but I think that the dance between the satire, horror is very well done at the beginning of this book. And if I was going to do book maths on it, I would say it is Jordan Peele meets Fargo. That is exactly what this book is. The thing that let it down for me was that as the novel progressed, I felt as though we ended up spending far too much time with side characters who kept on being introduced, and I then had to get my bearings a lot, which took me out of the story. I was trying to remember who everybody was, and that was a bit jarring when it came to being completely immersed in the story. Earlier this year, I read Ring Shout by P. Jelly Clark, which is similar. In a way, it is satire and horror, and it is looking at racism and lynching in the Ku Klux Klan, but that one is very precise and concise. It is a very short book. So if you read this and thought that maybe, like me, it felt a bit messy in places, then can I recommend Ring Shout as well? I think that there's loads of stuff to love about this, but it's just that sinking feeling you get, right, when you're reading a book that you really love and you feel as though it's not sustaining the same level throughout the entire text. So I really liked this one, and let me talk about the shortlist as a whole and where I would place it. All right, so if I was going to rank the books in my personal preference order from least favourite to favourite from this year's shortlist, we would have Treacle Walker by Alan Garner at the bottom of the pile. Then number 5, Glory by Novaya Bulawayo. Number 4, The Seven Moons of Marley Almeida by Shane Karanathalaka. I had to really think about the placement of this top 4. Small Things Like These by Claire Keegan would be my 3rd pick. The Trees by Percival Everett would be number 2. I think that this is overall a better crafted book, but I enjoyed the ideas explored in this one more, so it's just going above it. And then number 1, I would say for me, was Oh William by Elizabeth Strout. But as I mentioned in my review of this one, I really enjoyed it, but I didn't think, oh my god, this is a really, really brilliant book that I would think would win the Booker Prize. So if this is my top pick from the shortlist, that should kind of give you an indication of how I'm feeling about the shortlist, you know, as a whole. My 2 favourite books from this year's long list are still, let me reach over here, Maps of Our Spectacular Bodies by Maddie Mortimer and Night Crawling by Layla Motley. I also really enjoyed Case Study 2, and there's a lot to admire about other long listed books. So I have mixed feelings about this year's prize, but I'm very grateful for the books that it has introduced me to that I wouldn't have read before, that I really enjoyed. As I mentioned at the beginning, if you want to go and hear my thoughts on the other long-listed books, you can head over to that video, which I'll link in the description box down below. I will be really interested to see who wins this year. If you're watching this the day the video goes up, the prize is announced tomorrow, which is Monday the 17th. Is that right? I think it's the 17th, yeah. So yeah, I will be interested. If I had to make a prediction as to who is going to win, so not my personal favourite, but the one I predict will win, I'm going to say The 7 Moons of Marley Almeida. That's the one I would place money on if I was a betting person. So this has been the vlog. Those are my thoughts on the shortlist. I would love to know how you feel about this year's prize in a comment down below. If you are new to my channel and you like this video, it would be lovely if you subscribed and stuck around. If you enjoy my content and would like to consider supporting me on Patreon, that's very kind. Link to that is in the description box down below. I hope you're all doing okay, and I will see you again for another video very soon. Sending love. Bye.